So you're thinking about selling your home, but you've got tenants living in it. And now you're probably wondering, how complicated is this actually going to be? And we're not just talking about a tenant in your house. We're talking about the tenant in that ADU in the backyard. Because while this comes up everywhere, in Los Angeles, Glendale, Burbank, this whole area, there are definitely some specific things you need to be aware of. And I've seen people run into delays, deals fall apart, or leave money on the table simply because they didn't understand how this process works. So let me walk you through 5 things you need to know before you sell a tenant-occupied property so you can actually do this the right way. I'm Dave Robles, the owner of Think Real Estate here in Los Angeles, and I help people buy and sell homes all over the LA and Glendale area. And I can tell you from experience, selling a home with tenants is less about the house and more about people, timing, and strategy. The first thing you need to understand is this is not a normal sale. You're not just putting a home on the market, doing a couple open houses, and picking the best offer. Your timeline is different, your access is limited, and you're not fully in control of the property because someone else is living in it. And that changes everything. I've had sellers come to me thinking it's going to be a quick, straightforward process, and then they realize pretty quickly that showings are harder, scheduling is tighter, and everything takes a little bit more coordination. So, going in with the right expectations is huge. The second thing is you really have 2 paths, and every situation I've seen falls into one of these. You're either selling the property with the tenants in place, or you figure out a way to deliver it vacant before closing. Neither option is automatically better. Selling with the tenants in place can actually be easier in some cases, especially if you have a good tenant paying solid rents. There are investors out there who actually prefer that because it's immediate income. But are those investors the highest paying buyers? On the other hand, if you want to target more traditional buyers, people who want to move in, then delivering it vacant usually gives you the biggest buying pool. So, the right decision really depends on your goals, your timeline, and honestly, your specific tenant situation. And that leads us to the third point, which is probably the most important. The tenant can make or break your sale. I've seen deals go smoothly, quick escrow, great price because the tenant was cooperative. And I've also seen deals fall apart, completely stall out, just because the tenant didn't want to cooperate. You have to remember that from the tenant's perspective, this is stressful. They're thinking, am I gonna have to move? Is my rent gonna go up? What happens next? And when people feel uncertain like that, they tend to resist. So if you approach this the wrong way, if communication is bad, or if they feel blindsided, everything gets harder. Showings get denied, scheduling becomes a headache, and buyers start losing interest. The way I always explain it is your tenant is not an obstacle, they're part of the process. And if you treat them that way from the beginning, everything tends to go a lot smoother. The fourth thing you need to know is that you can't ignore the legal side of this, but you also don't need to overcomplicate it. There are rules in California about notice for showings, about tenant rights, and what you can and can't do. You can't just show up unannounced, you can't pressure the tenant, and you definitely don't want to do anything that could be seen as harassment. Where I see people get into a lot of trouble is they ignore this completely, thinking their tenant may not know their legal rights. Well, that's not only unrealistic, but it's immoral as well. What I find is tenants always learn their rights from friends or from doing a little research online. And trying to sidestep the rights will land you in a lot of hot water. So the key here is making sure the process is handled correctly from the start, so you don't run into delays or problems in the middle of your sale. The fifth thing is pricing and who you're actually marketing the property to. Not every buyer looks at tenant-occupied property the same way. If you're marketing to a typical buyer who wants to move in, a tenant can feel like a hurdle. But if you're marketing to an investor, a good tenant can actually be a selling point. It's income from day one. And for the right buyer, that's valuable. I've seen situations where a property with maybe 2 solid tenants in the house and the ADU actually attract stronger offers from investors than it would have vacant. Those property owners usually incentivize their tenants with a small discount on the monthly rent while the property was being shown, so that they can clean it and be flexible with showing requests. I've also seen the opposite, where going vacant opened the doors to way more competition and higher prices. So again, it comes back to strategy. You don't just list it and hope for the best, you position it the right way for the right buyer. And I'll add one more thing here because this comes up all the time. One of the biggest mistakes I see is sellers taking the first low-ball investor offer just because they think having a tenant limits their options. It's not always true. And if the property is marketed properly, you can still create competition and get a strong price. Selling a tenant-occupied property in Los Angeles is absolutely doable. It just requires a different approach. You need the right expectations, the right strategy, and a good understanding of how to handle the tenant side of things. If you get those pieces right, the process can actually be pretty smooth. So, if you're thinking about selling and you've got a tenant in place, feel free to reach out. I'm happy to walk you through your specific situation and help you figure out the best path forward based on your property, your timeline, and your goals. Give me a call. I'm here to help.